What's going on, guys? It's Brandon back here again today with one final video before I leave on vacation. We have a recap of free agency as of thus far. We are on day 4 free agency, and signings have really slowed down. Some guys have not signed yet. Tyler Johnson of the Blackhawks formerly hasn't signed. And then we've also been waiting on a lot of RFAs, Marty Nashis being the most notable of them, whether he's traded or signed, along with many others as well. Some, of course, have signed. On the board here, I have every free agency signing of players that I know. There are some of players I don't know, which I didn't put on the board. Some of these, the ones in black, are the ones that are re-signings, which I know is going to be very hard to read, if read at all. I'll be reading them off. And then in blue are the signings of guys that are on new teams. On the bottom of the board, which you can't see, I have trades. So players that were acquired through trade and such. So to start off with Anaheim, they did not do much in free agency. They re-signed Isaac Lundestrom by a 1-year, $1.5 million contract. They also signed Jansen Harkins, 2 years at league minimum, which is $775,000. So if I say league min, that's what $775,000 is. Boston, they were pretty busy. They signed Elias Lindholm. They now have both Elias and Hampus Lindholm, 7 by $7.5 million, so 7 years, $7.5 million. Zadorov signs the 6 by 5 in Boston, 6 years, $5 million per. Max Jones, a depth signing, 2 years at $1 million. Tufte signs for 1 year at league min. Brandon Bussey and Ian Mitchell are re-signings, 1 year at 75 league min each. Bussey I expected to be the backup goaltender this year with the moving of Allmark, but Boston ends up getting a goaltender back in that Allmark trade. Jordan Osterley also comes in as depth with a 2-year league min deal. Buffalo re-signs Cale Clague at 1 year at league min, but other than that, Jacob Bryson is brought back for 1 year at $900K. But along with that, a bunch of smaller signings, not very many big signings for the Buffalo Sabres. Sandstrom to play a third-string goaltender, 1 by league min. Lafferty is brought in after he's traded to the Chicago Blackhawks as rights. He doesn't sign in Chicago. He goes to Buffalo for 2 years at $1 million per. Jason Zucker signs a 1 year, $5 million contract. Dennis Gilbert, 1 year by $825,000. Reimer to play backup to Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, 1 by 1, 1 year, $1 million. Albe Kubel, 1 year by $1.25 mil. And Rathbone, 1 by $775K, league min. Calgary, their big move is getting Sharon Govich, 5 by $5.75, will fuel his Lego addiction for years to come. Along with that, Devin Cooley, who was with San Jose last season, 2 years by league min. Jake Bean, 2 years by $1.75 million. Anthony Mantha, 1 year by $3.5 million. And Martin Firk, 1 by league min. And Lomberg, a 2 by 2 deal. Sorry about that. Moving on, we have Carolina. Carolina, they made some re-signings that were big. This is every signing that's been from up until the end of the regular season until now. There were some extensions handed out near the end of the regular season. So some of those I brought in. For example, Jalen Chatfield signed a 3 by 3 re-signing with Carolina before the end of the season. And then Josiah Slavin's brought back by an 8 by $6.46 million. And Jordan Martinook, 3 by $3.05 million. Tyson Jost is brought in at a 1 year league min deal. Will Carrier, he gets a 6-year deal by $2 million per. Sean Walker, 5 by $3.6 million. Riley Stillman brought in a 1 year deal at league min. Jack Roslovic, the only big notable signing today, 1 year by $2.8 million. Eric Robinson, 1 year at $950K, and Shane Gostisbehere comes back to Carolina on a 3-year deal worth $3.2 million per. Chicago made some moves. Tyler Bertuzzi was the first signing of free agency, a 4-year, $5.5 million contract. Teuvo Teravainen was brought back into the fold as well, 3 years by $5.4. He's the only member now of any team that was with the championships. Teravainen was a rookie on the 2015 team. Laurent Brossoit to play backup to Peter Mrazek is brought in at 2 year, $3.3 million. Craig Smith, a 1 by 1 deal. Alec Martinez, can't believe he's a Chicago Blackhawk, one of my least favorite players for what he did in 2014 to the Hawks. 1 by 4. Patrick Maroon, which was a surprise, a 1 by 1.3. And TJ Brody, 2 years by $3.75 million, getting a veteran guy on that blue line. Some re-signings, Joey Anderson, a 2 year by $800K deal. Gutman brought back on a 1 year deal at league min. Lucas Reichel, 2 years by $1.2 million, and Alex Vlasic, 6 by $4.6 million. For the Hawks, not a bad free agency. I really like the Bertuzzi and Teravainen signings. Those two, I think, are going to benefit the top six. Get Bedard some guys to play around along with Kurashev. And, of course, you have Taylor Hall coming back, and Andreas Athanasiou can slot in there. And since Radish and Tyler Johnson are gone, those are guys that can slot into those lineup spots. Colorado, Casey Middlestat signed a 3-year, $5.75 million deal on a re-sign. Drew Ann is back for another year at $2.5 million, and Kivi Ranta comes back on a 1-year deal at League Min. Colorado signed Kelvin DeHaan for a 1-year, $800,000 deal. Parker Kelly, 1 year at $775,000. Kelly Rosen, 1 year at League Min as well. Eric Brandstrom, 1 year at $900,000. For Columbus, they didn't do much work. Sean Monahan's the only notable signing of theirs, 5 years at $5.5 million. Chikhanov comes in a he's extended 2 years, $2.1 million. Dylan Gambrell, 1 year by League Min, and Jack Johnson is brought back to Columbus after all these years, 1 year at League Min as well. For Dallas, they got a bunch of guys signed. Sam Steele resigns at 1 year, $1.2 million. Duchesne resigns at 1 year, $3 million, again, which is shocking. And Nils Lundqvist did not think he was coming back, but on a 1 year, $1.25 million deal. Matt Dumba's brought in 2 years, $3.75 million to replace Pak and Pa, probably. Labushkin, 2 years, $3.25. DeSmith to play backup because Wedgwood has moved on, 3 years by $1 million. Brendan Smith on a 1x1. Kyle Capobianco, 2 years at League Min. Colin Blackwell, 1 year at League Min. And Cole Lind, 1 year at League Min. For Detroit, they re-signed Kane at the 11th hour, 1 year by $4 million. Cam Talbot to play backup. They got a lot of goalies now. 2 years by $2.5 million. William Lagesson, 1 year by League Min. Eric Gustafson, 2 years by $2 million. Jack Campbell, after being bought out from Edmonton, is now 1 year League Min deal with the Detroit Red Wings. Christian Fishers re-signs for 1 year at $1.125. Sheldon Dries, 2 years at League Min. Sandin Pellikka signs his entry-level deal. That's Axel Sandin Pellikka. Beautiful name. Tarasenko signs 2 years at $4.75, reuniting Kane and Tarasenko, that Ranger duo that was acquired at the 2022 trade deadline. And Tyler Mott signs 1 year at $800,000. Edmonton, Kelvin Pickard is brought back on a 2-year, $1 million deal. Connor Brown, 1x1 as well. Corey Perry's brought back on a 1 year, 1.4. Janmark, 3 years at 1.45. Henrique at 2x3. Carrick is brought back at a 1 year League Min. Troy Stetcher, 2 years, 1.575. So a lot of re-signings at Edmonton, which makes sense. They made it to the Cup final. You don't need to change much. And then they improved. They get Victor Arvidsson for some depth, 2 years at $4 million. Jeff Skinner, 1 year at $3 million, as he's bought out of Buffalo. Josh Brown to solidify the defense, 3 years at $1 million. Colin Delia to play third-string goaltender, 1 year at $775,000. Cam Dineen, 1 year at League Min as well. Florida did some re-signing and then didn't really do much after that. Sam Reinhart gets the 8 years, $8.63 million extension. Kulikov, 4 by 1.15. Only re-signings there in Florida. Thomas Nosek is brought in on a 1 year deal at League Min. AJ Greer, 2 years at $850K. Rasmus Asplund, 1 year at League Min. Excuse me, I feel like got heartburn. Jesper Boquist, 1 year at League Min. Chris Driedger is brought back to Florida on a 1 year League Min deal. Nate Schmidt, 1 year, $800K, which is a very big discount for him. That's to replace kind of Ekman Larson, I believe. Anton Lundell re-signs at 6 years, $5 million. He was an RFA. And Mackenzie Entwistle is brought in on a 1 year League Min deal as well. A lot of depth signings for Florida, not much there. LA, Warren Fogel's their guy, 3 years at $3.5 million, as well as Joel Edmondson on a 4 year, $3.8 million. Jack Studnicka's also brought in on a 1 year League Min deal, but they re-signed Trevor Lewis and Phoenix Copley, 1 year, $800,000 and 1 year, $825,000 respectfully. Alex Turcotte, 3 years at $775,000. Nothing's gone right for Turcotte since he's been drafted. Injuries have plagued him, and he's had no luck whatsoever. He gets that 3 year deal, some stability to prove what he's got and to make the lineup. David Riddick is brought back on a 1 year, $1 million deal, which is fine. He played well in LA. Back up to Minnesota. They get Yakov Trenin at 4 years, $3.5 million, Travis Boyd at 1 year League Min, and Reese Johnson 1 year at League Min. They also re-signed Marc-Andre Fleury to a 1 year, $2.5 million deal, which he'll retire at the end of, as he said. Jake Middleton, 4 years at $4.35 million, who was an undrafted guy, by the way, who's now earned his way onto Minnesota permanently. And then Devin Shore, 1 year league minimum. Montreal made 2 signings. Alex Barre-Boulet, 1 year at League Min, and Juraj Slafkovsky gets the 8-year extension, $7.6 million a year. That's going to age like fine wine for Montreal, I believe. First overall pick in 2022. Then we get to Nashville. Nashville is someone I'd consider a winner of free agency, as well as I'd say Nashville and Washington are the big winners of this year's offseason. For Nashville, they get Jonathan Marchessault at 5 years, $5.5 million. Stamkos at 4 years, $8 million. That's going to be bizarre to see. Brady Shea at a 7x7. That could age poorly, let's be honest here. Wedgwood to replace Lankinen, which Lankinen hasn't been signed either for some reason. He played fine in Nashville, but Wedgwood, I'd say, is a little bit of an upgrade at backup goaltender. 2 years at $1.5 million. Vinny Hinostroza is brought in at 2 years League Min for some depth, along with Blankenberg, 2 years League Min. Lucchini, 2 years League Min, and Matt Murray, the other Matt Murray, not the known Matt Murray, 1 year League Min. They re-signed Alex Carrier to a 3 year, $3.75 million deal, and give Saros an 8 year extension at $7.74 million, which has led many to question whether or not Askarov is on his way out. With Wedgwood signed, I don't know why he's not playing backup. That could save you some money, but Askarov, I think he's going to be traded out from what I can tell from here. Devils get Brett Pesce at 6 years, $5.5 million, and then Brendan Dillon at 3 years, $4 million. They get Stefan Nason, who was originally in New Jersey. He was part of that 2018 team that lost in the first round to Tampa. He's back now on a 3 year, $2.75 million deal. And Tomas Tatar returns on a 1 year, $1.8 million deal. Mike Hardman is also brought in at 2 years, I'll just say League Min. Ian McDermott's re-signed at 3 year, $1.15 million, and Shane Bowers 2 years at League Min as well. For the Islanders, they're like Montreal. They signed 2 guys. They re-signed Mike Riley to a $1.125 million deal, 1.25, not 1.125. And then they get Anthony Duclair for some scoring, 4 years, $3.5 million per. There are a lot of guys in the league right now that have played for a lot of teams. Duclair is one of them. He might break the record for teams played. Sillinger has 12. Duclair has 9 right now, after he plays with the Islanders for a bit. Carrick is then not. This is there's Sam Carrick and there's Connor Carrick. I believe Connor Carrick is the one in Edmonton. Sam Carrick sent a 3x1 deal, and the Rangers. The Rangers re-signed Capo Caca, which I was shocked about. 1 year at $2.4 million. I thought they were going to let him go, to be honest, or trade him or something. Grew is brought into some depth. 1 year at League Min, and Casey Fitzgerald 1 year at League Min as well. Just some depth signings. Ottawa, they didn't really do much either. They signed David Perron to a 2x4, and they re-signed Shane Pinto to a $3.75 million deal. Other than that, they get Highmore back at 1 year League Min. They signed Philip Roos at 1 year League Min. Adam Gaudette 1 year League Min. You got a trio of former Blackhawks right there. Noah Gregor 1 year at $850,000, and Michael Amadio. That's the only other significant signing. Maybe an overpayment here. 3 years at $2.6 million. I will say, while over $1 billion was spent on day one, these were not a lot of big signings in the NHL. I feel like the salaries went down overall over the last, comparatively speaking, to the last couple of years. The biggest signing of the day was Jake Getzel, which we'll get to. But over that, there really is not a lot of term, not a lot of large contracts. Not even a $10 million contract in this offseason. Not one, only one. The highest one was 9. After that, you had, I think, 2 and 8, which was Reinhardt's, and actually, that might be it. That honestly might be the only one that hit 8. But moving on to Philadelphia, they only re-signed 4 guys. Eric Johnson's back on a 1x1. Garnet Hathaway's back on a 2x2.4. Mitchkov signs his entry-level deal. He's terminated his contract with the KHL team he was with, which I believe was SKA Moscow. And Ivan Fedotov is back 2 years at 3.25, solidifying his spot as the goaltender. We'll see what he can do. He didn't play a lot with Philly last year, but they clearly have faith in him. Pittsburgh, Grzelcyk is brought in at 1 year, $2.75 million. Beauvillier, 1.25 for 1 year. but I don't know how to pronounce his name, but he's from Arizona. Imama, 1 year, $775,000. Sebastian Aho, not the Carolina one, is brought in, 2 years at League Min. Will Butcher resigns at 1 year League Min. Nedeljkovic resigns with 2 years, $2.5 million. Blake Lizotte, 2 years at $1.85 million, and Emil Bemstrom, 1 year at League Min. So for Pittsburgh, not really sure what they're going to do because they're starting to trade off pieces, but they've made a bunch of smaller signings, so we'll see what Pittsburgh's going to do. They traded off Riley Smith, which we'll get to in the trades, but we'll see. San Jose, they signed Tyler Toffoli to a 4x6, getting Will Smith in the future some help, William Eklund, some players that are going to be moving into the lineup this year. San Jose should be better, not very much better. Alex Wenberg is brought in a 2x5. And Lucas Carlson also signs for 2 years at League Min. Will Smith signs his entry-level deal, and Luke Cunnin is brought back on a 1 year, $2.75 million deal. Seattle's big fish was Brandon Montour. They signed him at 7 years, $7.14. Chandler Stevenson also comes in on a 7 year, $6.25 million deal. We'll see how that deal ages. John Hayden's the only guy brought back, 1 year at League Min. Mitchell Stevens is brought in at 2 years League Min. Ben Myers, 1 year at League Min. Josh Mahura, 1 year at League Min. And Sam LaJorge, 1 year at League Min. St. Louis only made one signing in Pierre-Oliver Joseph at 1 year, $950,000. They brought back Kasperi Kapanen on a 1x1. Pavel Buchnevich was re-signed to a 6x8. That one could be interesting in a few years. Scott Perunovich was brought back on a 1 year, $1.15 million deal. And Adam Juracek is the first of the 2024 draft class to sign their entry-level deals, 3 years, $950,000. Moving up to Tampa Bay, Jake Getzel's the big fish of free agency, and that's who Tampa gets. They traded for his rights, and they get it. 7 years, $9 million per. Getzel replaces Stamkos. That's what the entire thing of it is. They get younger, and I think it's a good move for Tampa. Ylönen is brought in on a 1 year League Min. I'm surprised he only got League Min. He was a good bottom six forward, fourth line forward in Montreal. Gergensons finally leaves Buffalo. I never thought it would happen. 3 years at $950,000 or $850,000 actually. Hedman resigns. He gets an extension, 4 years by $8 million. And Cam Atkinson brought in a very cheap 1 year, $900,000 deal. He is 35 now, so he is getting older. So we'll see how he does. Toronto was busy. They re-signed Max Domi, 4 years at $3.75. Timothy Liljegren, which I'm really surprised they re-signed, 2 years, $3 million. Joseph Wall, 3 years, $3.66. It looks like he's going to be the starter next season. Chris Tanev is brought in, 6 years, $4.5 to a 34-year-old defenseman. Defensemen age better than forwards, but Tanev, he's had injury problems. If he can play the full contract, I will be surprised, but I'm rooting for him. Ekman Larsson's brought in on a 4 year, $3.5 million deal. Anthony Stolarz to play backup, 2 years at $2.5. Matt Murray signs a 1 year, $875,000 deal, so he's still playing according to his contract. Yanni Hakanpää, while not announced, did sign 2 years at $1.5 million. The Stars were worried about his knee problem and his deteriorating knees. We'll see if he can play. If not, that's really unfortunate for Hakanpää. He's a very big defenseman. So it would really help Toronto if he could, but if he can't, then that's really unfortunate for his career. Felipe Myers also brought in on a 1 year League Min deal. For Utah, almost at Arizona, Liam O'Brien is re-signed at 3x1. Ben McCartney, 1 year at League Min. Kesselring is brought back on a 2 year, $1.4 deal. Koliachonik, 1 year at League Min. Valimaki, a 2x2. And Sean Durzi was their key re-signing, 4x6, going to Sean Durzi. Utah is going to look very interesting next year. They made some trades. They got some key defensemen. They had no defensemen signed before the offseason, and now they have a plethora of defensemen, in which some very elite defensemen have been added to this team. Not many elite forwards, but overall we'll see how this shakes up and if they become a very defensive team, and they still have $23 million in cap space. Stenlund's brought in on a 2x2. He'll play probably fourth line minutes. Connaughton is some depth defense, 2 years at League Min. And then Ian Cole, 1 year at $3.1 million as well. Vancouver was busy. Teddy Bluger resigns at 2 years, $1.8. Dakota Joshua resigns at 4 years, $3.25. Tyler Myers, I never thought I'd see him sign another contract. signs a 3x3 with Vancouver, much more reasonable than his previous cap hit. Jet Wu re-signs on a 1 year by League Min. Philip Hronik re-signs 8 years, 7.25, which was a little earlier than the final, I believe that happened. Mark Friedman brought back on a 1 year League Min deal, as well as Vasily Podkolzin, 2 years by $1 million. Vinny Desjardins is their first re-signing on a 2x2, and then Jake DeBrusk decided they wanted to give a 7x5.52. That contract is shocking to me because I did not think DeBrusk would get that kind of term. Kiefer Sherwood, 2 years by 1.5. Danton Heinen, 2 years by 2.25. Derek Forber, 1 year by 1.5. Yuri Patera, 2 years by League Min, and he'll be a third, fourth string goalie for them. And Nathan Smith, 1 year by League Min. Vancouver and Boston really just switched players. You bring in DeBrusk, you bring in Heinen, you bring in Forbert. Boston gets Lindholm and Sidorov, so they're kind of just switching players at this point. Vegas signs a 1 year League Min deal to Zach Aston Reese, and they sign Ilya Samsonov to play their backup goaltender, as well as they trade out Logan Thompson, which we'll get to, because that was a very bizarre trade to me. Samsonov's going to play backup on a 1 year, $1.8 million deal. Victor Olofsson on a very reasonable $1.105 or $1.05 million for Olofsson, seeing if he can get back that 20-25 goal scoring touch that he had a few years ago in Buffalo. And then Robert Hagg also brought in on a 1 year League Min deal. Kaden Korzak re-signs at 2 years, $825,000, and Pavel Dorofiev, 2 years, $1.835, as another re-signing for Vegas. Washington, we got two teams left here. Connor McMichael brought back at a 2 year, $2.1 million. Matt Roy, 6 years, or Matt Waugh, I'm not sure. 6 years, $5.75 million over 6 years for Matt Roy. Leaves LA, makes a significant sum. Washington has a very new look than they did last year. They are a lot younger, and they brought in some depth, which can be very interesting if it works out. Brandon Duhaime, 2 years at $1.85 million. Taylor Radish is signed on a 1x1 see if he can get his game back to where he was a year ago, not this previous season, but the year before, where he had 20 goals with the Hawks. And then Luke Philp, also from the Hawks, 1 year at League Min. Winnipeg re-signs Dylan DeMello, 4 years by 4.9, and they also re-signed Colin Miller to a 2 year, $1.5 million deal. They bring back Eric Comrie from previous seasons, who is their backup, 2 years at $825,000. Capo Kakkonen on a 1 year, $1 million deal. So Comrie's probably going to play third goalie. Kakkonen will probably be the backup. Anderson Dolan's brought it from LA, 2 years at League Min. Hayden Fleury, 1 year at League Min. And Logan Shaw, 1 year at League Min for them. Now to the trades. Players acquired through trade. Anaheim got Brian Dumoulin from Seattle and Robbie Fabry from Detroit, and cap dumps for both of them. Boston gets Korpisalo and bought back in the Ullmark trade. Kastelik along with that, and they one-for-one swap Jiri Lehtera, or not Jiri, I don't remember, is it Jiri Lehtera? It might be. Lehtera and Lauko swap right there. Minnesota ends up getting Lauko back, which I'm really surprised Boston did that deal, as I thought Lauko was very good in their lineup, and I thought he was going to be there for a while as kind of a middle six forward. Calgary ends up getting Kevin Ball back in the Jacob Markstrom deal. And Buffalo ends up picking up Malestein for a pick from the Washington Capitals. Chicago gets Mikheyev in the... they picked up Ilya Mikheyev in the trade for a fourth-round pick, along with a second and Sam Lafferty, who signs in Buffalo, the rights to Sam Lafferty. LA picks up Tanner Jeannot. So Tampa's admitted that trade was horrible. They gave up 5 picks for Jeannot, and then they only got a second-round pick back. Kyle Burrows was traded 1-for-1 with Carl Grundstrom, and Darcy Kemper is 1-for-1 with Pierre-Luc Dubois, shedding them of that deal, and they get some upgrading goaltending, you could argue, with Darcy Kemper, who did have a bad year last year, but we'll see if he can re-get his game in LA. He did win a Stanley Cup only 2 years ago. Minnesota, as I mentioned before, picked up Lauko. New Jersey picks up Paul Cotter and a pick for Akira Schmid and Alex Holtz, which was another shocker of a trade. The Rangers pick up Riley Smith. I forgot to mention they also picked up Kovacevic from... I'm blanking on the team. But they also get Markstrom and Kovacevic from Calgary, I believe it was. So New Jersey picking up Markstrom, upgrading their goaltending. Their tandem looks like Markstrom and Allen next year, which is pretty good. That's what they needed, an upgrade at goaltending. And they brought in Pesce and Dylan, Nason, upgrades on defense, and Nason an upgrade up front. For Ottawa, they bring in Linus Ullmark to improve the goaltending, Nick Jensen as part of the trade that sent Jacob Chikrin to Washington, and John Jenick as a one-for-one swap with Utah. San Jose picks up Dellandrea, Jake Wallman, and Carl Grundstrom. Grundstrom was one-for-one with LA for Kyle Burrows. Jake Wallman was a cap dump from Detroit, so they can sign Kane and Tarasenko. And Dellandrea was a guy from Dallas who was an RFA who they didn't have the money to sign, so they sent him to San Jose, who did sign him. For St. Louis, they pick up Matthew Joseph to acquire both Joseph brothers. They get Radek Faksa and a cap dump from Dallas. And they pick up Alexander Texier from St. Louis, or from Columbus. And hopefully that's a reclamation project. Texier's had his struggles. We'll see if he can get his game back in St. Louis. Tampa Bay, they acquired Ryan McDonough once again after a couple years in Nashville. Connor Geekie and J.J. Moser come back in that huge trade for Mikhail Sergachev with Utah, which we'll get to, because at Utah, they pick up Mikhail Sergachev, they pick up Dan Marino from... Not Dan Marino. Is it Dan? Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the name. It's not Dan Marino, is it? John Marino, that's what I'm thinking of. John Marino. Dan Marino's the Dolphins quarterback from all those years ago. John Marino from the New Jersey Devils, that's where they probably got Kovacevic. And they also pick up Sokolov in the one-for-one deal with Ottawa for Jan Jenik. So we'll see how good Utah is in their first season. They definitely made a lot of moves. They made some big splashes with their money. And they still have $23 million left. Vegas picks up Alex Holtz and Akira Schmid, so you got your presumably your backup goaltender in Vegas. Although they have Samsonov, so maybe third string for Schmid. Alex Holtz, we'll see if he can get his game in Vegas, because in New Jersey he was not being deployed by Lindy Ruff. We'll see if the system in Vegas allows him to work more and maybe get some... He's meant for scoring goals. We'll see if he can do that in Vegas. Vegas severely depleted now on offense with the losses of Marchessault and Stevenson. Washington, to end it off, they pick up Dubois. We'll see if he can get his game back after a horrible year in LA. Chikrin, that's a really interesting pickup for Washington to get him out of Ottawa. Washington made the playoffs last year, and they're clearly looking to still win now while Ovechkin is still on the team. With Backstrom and Oshie's careers, Backstrom's probably over. Oshie, if he can play, will play, but it's not looking good for him. So getting younger, both offensively and defensively. Logan Thompson to play net. They move off Darcy Kemper and bring in Thompson. That's a very good move for Washington. And they also bring in Mangiapane from Calgary. So for very good moves overall for Washington, in my opinion. They had a very good trading offseason. They bring in a few guys in free agency like Roy and Duhaime, but I really like what they did trading-wise, because if Dubois can get his game back, he can be perfect with Ovechkin, to say the least. And that kind of replaces Kuznetsov from the previous seasons as well. And Backstrom is not going to probably play again, so you need to replace that depth somewhere. Overall, been a very fun free agency, very unpredictable. In terms of how the power rankings are going to go, I'm going to have to base it heavily off this. Remember, there are guys who still haven't signed, RFAs, Tyler Johnson, Kevin Lankinen. So we'll see. Overall, we'll see how the rest of the offseason shapes out, but I'm not going to be posting up for another 10 days now, as I'll be on vacation. So I want to thank you all so much for watching. Content returns when I return back on the 14th, and I shall see you all in the next one. Have a good one.